Tonight is really an appeal to my colleagues. It's a cry for survival and justice for unborn baby girls and boys. Unborn children need the President of the United States. It needs all of us. They need all of us to be their friend and advocate, not powerful adversaries. In his inaugural speech, President Biden said, and I quote, "The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer." He spoke of a cry for survival from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate, close quote. We believe the dream of justice for all cannot be achieved if an entire segment of society is legally ignored and legally discriminated against because of where they live in their mother's wombs and how small and unbelievably defenseless they really are. We know the president understands this. He gets it, or at least he once did. Years ago, then, Senator Biden wrote to a constituent explaining his support for a law against funding for abortion, and he said it would, quote, protect both the woman and her unborn child, close quote. Senator Biden said, "I have consistently, on no fewer than 50 occasions, voted against federal funding for abortions. Those of us," he went on to say, "who are opposed to abortion should not be compelled to pay for them," close quote. My colleagues on the floor and people, Americans all across the country agree with that. Those of us who are opposed to abortion should not be compelled to pay for them. According to public opinion polls, most Americans, 60%, according to the most recent Marriott poll, agree that taxpayers should not be compelled to fund abortion. Lives have been saved by the Hyde Amendment. More than 20 peer-reviewed studies show that more than 2 million people are alive today in the United States because of the Hyde Amendment, with almost 60,000 children spared death by abortion each and every year. Over 2 million people who would have been aborted instead survived because public funds were unavailable to effectuate their violent demise, and their mothers instead benefited from maternal and prenatal health care and support. As we all know, the science of human development has not changed, and thanks to ultrasound, unborn babies are now more visible than ever. As we all know, my wife and I are grandparents. With each new child that our children give birth to, our daughters and daughters-in-law, the first pictures we see, the first pictures we put on the refrigerator are ultrasound pictures. The first movies we see, the videos, are of that ultrasound, of that child sucking his or her thumb, doing somersaults, having great activity that will be great activity when they're born as well. You know, it was Abby Johnson who quit as a Planned Parenthood director in Texas when she was told she had to assist in an ultrasound-guided abortion. And when she saw that child in real time, literally ripped and shredded and then sucked out of the womb by the suction machine, she walked out of that abortion clinic and has never gone back, and is now a very powerful and articulate spokeswoman for the Right to Life cause. Her book, Unplanned, I recommend it. It is a book that changes hearts. She was on the other side for years, so much so she was the director of a Planned Parenthood clinic. And yet when she saw the deed itself, the dismemberment of that child, she walked out and walked out forever. The same goes for guys, abortionists like Bernard Nathanson, who said, once you see that ultrasound, and he was one of the founders of NARAL, a very large abortion rights organization, he said, "I've come to the agonizing conclusion that I presided over 60,000 deaths." And he, too, became a pro-lifer. and ultrasound and prenatal surgery, where the babies were treated as patients, not as a being to be extinguished or exterminated, changed his mind. Growing numbers of Americans are shocked, Madam Speaker, that the methods of abortion include dismemberment. They include the literal decapitation of this helpless child. And of course, drugs like RU-46 starve the baby to death before he or she is then forcibly expelled from the womb. The multi-billion-dollar abortion industry is very clever, and they cleverly market the sovereignty of choice while going to extraordinary lengths to ignore, trivialize, and cover up the battered baby victim. Abortion violence, Madam Speaker, must be replaced with compassion and empathy for women and for defenseless unborn babies. We must love them both. Birth is an event that happens to all of us. It's not the beginning of life. That child is just as vibrant before birth as after, just too big to continue inside the womb. Sadly, more than 62 million babies have been killed by abortion in the United States since Roe versus Wade, a loss of children's lives that equates with the entire population of Italy. I truly believe that someday future generations of Americans look back on us like we look back on people who did other things in previous centuries and years back. They'll look back on us and wonder how and why a society that prided itself on human rights could have effectuated and enabled the loss of so many defenseless babies. 62 million and counting. Madam Speaker, last week, President Biden overturned the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance, the Mexico City policy. His executive order forces U.S. taxpayers to fund organizations that promote, lobby, or perform abortions on demand in foreign countries. Americans overwhelmingly oppose using U.S. foreign aid to subsidize abortion. The Marist poll just last week, found that more than 3 in 4 Americans, 77%, oppose using tax dollars to support abortions in other countries. 77%. Let's use those tax dollars to combat AIDS, to help people with malaria. And I am the author of the reauthorization of the PEPFAR program, the AIDS program, that is now in effect. It was originally sponsored by our good friend and colleague, Henry Hyde, and George W. Bush was one of his greatest achievements. That's where our foreign policy dollars and foreign aid dollars need to be spent, on nurturing. There's nothing benign about dismembering an unborn child or giving poisons that effectuate their death. Among other pro-abortion executive orders, on January 29th, the president announced steps to resume funding to the UN Population Fund, even though that agency has supported China's forced abortion policy for decades. Madam Chair, I've chaired hearings, 66 of them, on combating human rights in China over these many years. I've been here 41 years. And I can tell you that China treats its unborn and its women in the most horrific of ways, in the 1 child per couple, now 2 child per couple, where coercion is used to enforce it, has led to massive, massive losses of life and broken women. And the UN Population Fund has been right there, cheerleading, supporting, aiding and abetting these crimes against women and children. Finally, Madam Speaker, by reason of their age, dependency, immaturity, inconvenience, or unwantedness, unborn children have been denied justice. And the president calls, we all want justice. And they have been rendered legally persona non grata. Yet their cries for survival, using the president's words, can't be any more desperate than they are. These children need the President of the United States to be their friend and advocate, not another powerful adversary. They need us to be their friend and advocate and not powerful adversaries. I'd like to now yield.